Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, BNEWS Director Rich Hosford. You may have seen them recently. Large crowds of people, some of them carrying signs, gathered at the district off of Mall Road. Sometimes standing in front of a nondescript building and sometimes marching around the office park. They are citizens, many of them local religious leaders, rallying against the current U.S. immigration policies that, they say, are unjustifiably breaking immigrant families apart and causing unnecessary pain to young children. They are marching in the district because it is the location of an Immigration and Customs Enforcement, commonly known as ICE, office. It is the only ICE field office in Massachusetts and thus has become a focal point for protesters from around the state. We wanted to find out more about what drove them to participate in the rallies and what future actions might be taken. To do so, we invited two of the leaders, Rabbi Susan Abramson of Temple Shalom Emeth and Reverend Angela Wells of the United Church of Christ Congregational, to come on and share their thoughts. Later in the show, I interview Burlington Police Chief Michael Kent about the laws concerning public demonstration and how everyone involved can stay safe. But first, my interview with Rabbi Abramson and Reverend Wells here on BNEWS In Depth. I am now joined by two of the local Burlington spiritual leaders who are part of the organizers and sort of supporters of these rallies at the ICE facility. I'm joined by Rabbi Susan Abramson and Reverend Angela Wells. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. So just talk a little bit about how this got started, this local push and sort of some of the players involved and kind of how we got to, what we have now had 4 different rallies.
There have been numerous different rallies,
okay.
but different groups have come in actually to Burlington to organize the rallies, and we've been invited to a lot of them.
Okay.
So that's how we've kind of gotten involved.
And there's really been 2 different types of demonstrations at the ICE offices. Back in the winter, they were primarily vigils that were planned on a case-by-case basis when people were coming for their immigration check-ins and were at risk of deportation. And in those cases, either the individuals or their families or their lawyer would reach out to any of the immigration advocacy groups and say, we want a group of folks there to support this person when they're going for their hearing, and to let ICE know that we're not in favor of them being detained. And what we found when we were attending those vigils for specific individuals was that other people are going into the ICE offices at the same time for their check-ins, and everybody who was going there appreciated our presence and our solidarity with them. And so now they've kind of segued into these Jericho walks, which don't have anything, aren't planned pertaining to a specific individual,
right.
But are on a more regular rotating basis, and to bring wider visibility to the injustices being carried out there.
And what was, the outcome of some of the specific cases that you were there to support?
I remember one man, Francisco Rodriguez. He was a very high-profile case. He's lived in the Boston area for at least 20 years, if not more. He has a family, and he's a janitor at MIT. And he was placed in deportation proceedings and had to go to the Burlington ICE offices, and there was a huge vigil for him. And he was detained and held in detention, I believe, for about 6 months, from last July 2017 to December 2017, and then he was released, and now he wears an ankle monitoring bracelet. But there have been other, I don't remember the name of the individual gentleman was, we showed up for him, and he was given a deportation sentence, and he was allowed to spend that evening with his family. So he left the ICE offices and went home with his family devastated, and the next day he had to leave back and go to fly to Panama to leave this country. So
quite an abrupt disruption of somebody's life.
Yes.
Yeah, there have definitely been numerous people who have gone through the ICE office. The ICE office isn't a detention center itself. It's more of a pass-through kind of place. And so there have been numerous people who have passed through there and been in detention and then deported.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the demonstration this week, you mentioned the term a Jericho walk, and you said this is not so much tied to an individual case, but more the policy as we're seeing it in the country. What specific kind of tenets of that policy are kind of, you think, motivating people to want to be heard or to speak out?
Well, I think one of the biggest motivators is the separation of families and children from parents. That really is devastating, and I think that touches people in a particular additional way to just the deportations in general. And so I think we've been seeing larger and larger turnouts at the ICE offices because it touches people so deeply and so personally, and they imagine, what if it was our children? We couldn't imagine a young child being separated from parents. So I think that and just the tension that's just been escalating over all the policies getting worse and worse and more horrible has caused people to just want to stand up and be heard.
And so with these, well, actually, let's drill down on that policy a little bit. I mean, so I guess, there's a lot of people who are up in arms about it. Of course, there's probably some who are for it, but, very hardliners on immigration. But I think, the idea of separating people from or children from families is something we can all agree is, even if you are anti-immigration, that it's at least a policy that, seems cruel. I mean, I'm trying to stay in the middle here, but just on its face. What do you think that, having that as part of, the laws in the books says about, our country at this moment?
Well, it's my understanding that our country is based on a Judeo-Christian set of values. Love your neighbor as yourself. I think about the Statue of Liberty and Emma Lazarus' poem, Give me your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, send us the wretched refuse of your teeming shores. And so it just says something about the lack of values of our country right now, that instead of being a home for immigrants and a home for people who are fleeing from persecution, it's become just the opposite. It's become a very nationalistic, the only people who are allowed to live in our country are those who have citizenship or who are born here, as if we have some special privilege to live on this land that other people who happen to be born in another country don't have. And to me, like the most important commandment of my faith is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. And so the whole world, I feel, is created by God, and each human being is born in the image of God, and so each human being has an equal right to be here. There's no special, magical, I feel, right that American citizens have that others shouldn't also be able to partake of. That's my feeling.
Now, of course, we've had, immigration policy. There's been deportations before the current administration. This ICE facility has been in Burlington for a while now. What do you think is different in the atmosphere or in the rhetoric that we're hearing now that is sort of inspiring more attention to this issue?
Prior to this administration, yes, of course, there have always been undocumented people in our country from its founding. It's just what's your definition of undocumented and what's your definition of immigrant, which is a conversation in and of itself. But before this, yes, there were undocumented people here, but as long as they were law-abiding and checked in at their regular check-ins, and were participating members of society, there wasn't this harsh insistence on deportation, and that has escalated under this new administration, and immigration judges are being given quotas of how many people they have to process through the system at these exorbitant rates, and so the quickest thing to do is to just deport people, because keeping them in the system and having them go through a legal immigration process is long and time consuming and cumbersome, and so the easiest thing to do is just get rid of them. The irony being that these people aren't even expected to go back to their countries of origin. Immigration judges often say that they need to get plane tickets back to Panama because Panama has very lax immigration laws, and the United States knows that if you get sent to Panama, that country will take the person and won't send them back on a plane to the United States, which is what our hardline immigration people are trying to avoid. And so just the escalation of ripping people from not only their families but from their communities, from their jobs, is under this administration, I think, has drawn so much attention. And because, in certain parts of the country, even children, there's a student sitting in the desk next to you in 3rd grade and the next day they're not there, and teachers are being forced to explain to their classes why their classmate isn't there. And so it's affecting people at all levels of society who I don't think ever thought they would be pulled into the web of, immigration reform and our immigration policies. But since affecting so many people all around the country, it's drawn a lot of media attention and is now drawing people out of their homes and into places like demonstrating in front of the ICE offices.
And I think the word rhetoric is a key word, because I think the rhetoric in our country right now, coming from the top levels of the administration, is filled with such hatred and insensitivity, and I think that has a trickle-down effect to everybody in our society. It affects us all. We hear it on the news constantly and in the media, and so that's really it's not who we are. Like we're not a country of people who hate each other.
Right.
We're supposed to love each other and be sensitive to each other, and I think that's the big difference in this administration. In addition to the policies, it's just you see people standing up and saying, get rid of them, and using pejorative language to describe people who happen to be from other cultures, stereotyping people in negative ways. Again, from the very top of the administration. So it's kind of it's setting a very, very negative tone for our society right now.
And maybe this is too broad of a question, and you can tell me if it is, but it's interesting because for such a long time, I think, there were people obviously that were anti-immigrants, but they were not front and center like they are now. Do you think it was just something that was always on there, sort of boiling, or did having somebody like the current administration sort of champion it bring people to that point? I know it's sort of a philosophical question more than anything, but any thoughts on that?
Can you clarify the question?
So we now see people going online, social media saying, like deport all these people, like a lot of, sort of very strong views. Do you think people always had those views, or is it something that because we have somebody that, for whatever reason, maybe other reasons people latched onto, they're now sort of being brought into that direction?
I think it's giving people license to express those types of views that they felt maybe they shouldn't say out loud before. Like I know there's been a rise in anti-Muslim sentiment, there's been a rise in anti-Semitism, and people feel freer to express those prejudices than they did before, and I think that's part of this, the tone set by this administration.
Okay.
Also,
I would agree with what Susan said. This administration is giving people permission to spew that hateful vitriol, but also it's convenient for groups of people to have a scapegoat, and so if your economy and your community is suffering, or you don't feel like the country is the best version of itself that it could be, it's very easy, and that's what our administration is doing, is highlighting certain people and saying it's their fault, they're the criminals, we need to get them out of here and then all will be well. And that kind of thinking is insidious, and you hear it enough and you start to buy into it, and it just perpetuates the intolerance that we're seeing from the highest levels all the way down into our local communities.
And I think one of the things, going back to the point the policy we've talked about the separation of families, is, I think there's some stated justification that, people are breaking the law, and if somebody breaks the law in the United States, they go to jail, they don't get to have their kids with them. But it's my understanding from some of the news reports that I've read that a lot of the people who are having their
families separated aren't trying to sneak into the country. They're showing up at the border seeking asylum because dangerous situations back home, and are being treated as criminals. Any thoughts on sort of that situation? And I mean, it's another big topic. We can get back to the local demonstration right after this. But
I mean, it resonates for me as a Jew because there was a boat called the St. Louis filled with people who were escaping Hitler's Nazi Germany.
Right, trying to seek asylum.
Trying to seek asylum in our country, and a whole boatload full of people came from Europe to our shores and was turned away for similar reasons. So, and all those people, the boat returned to Europe, and all those people were sent back to concentration camps, and all of them were killed. So I know from personal experience as a Jew, like what the implications of that are, and it's very, very real today also for others. So again, it's unconscionable for me that our country, which is based on these principles, would turn people away who are in desperate straits and face the likelihood of murder by others in their own countries. Again, like as an American, I feel that's not who we are, and as a Jew, I feel that's not who we should be.
And I would just add to that you have to think about how desperate someone must be to, leave their community, leave their country of origin with where their primary language is spoken, leave everything they know, their whole reality, and pick up literally what they can carry and risk their children's lives to come to the border of a foreign country, which they presumably must know is becoming increasingly hostile towards immigrants. And, what would motivate someone to do that? Obviously, like life or death circumstances. You don't do that unless it's your last resort. And I also think the United States should be thinking about what are the situations in these Central and South American countries that are causing people to come to our borders and take that incredible risk? And are the problems back there, has the United States contributed to them in any way, like through NAFTA or drug cartels? Where are those drug cartels getting their money?
Right.
Primarily from the U.S. And so it's complicated. We need to think about the ways in which we're complicit with the problems in these countries that are driving people out of them and to our border. The fact of the matter is that no nation lives in isolation anymore. This idea that you can draw hard borders and say we have nothing to do with you and your problems are, your own. It's just a falsity. So,
and I really feel like more people would react even more strongly if they were able to understand it and see these things, these people, how desperate people are for themselves. I feel like there's a disconnect in our day and age with social media. Everything is so diffused that if we were able to meet people personally and just understand the gravity of their situation, like Francisco Rodriguez, his daughter and mother actually came to our synagogue for a fundraiser while he was in detention, and just to see the profound grief of both of them, and just to just feel like what they were going through, and how just their lives are totally disruptive, and like I can't even explain it. You need to see the person in front of you, but our media kind of keeps everything at arm's distance, and even if you see something on a screen, you don't really get the gravity of it. So I think that we pass judgment based not on the reality of the situation, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's hard to keep people in that category of other when you're talking to them face to face.
Exactly, we need to not other people.
And so there's been a number of rallies, or demonstrations, rallies, however you want to call them, and they've gotten slightly grown in size as time has gone on. Correct? Like the one this week was larger than the other one. What do you think that says about just kind of people and their views on what's going on and the importance of kind of getting out?
I would say that this administration, for better or for worse, has emboldened people towards civic demonstrations. People walked in the Women's March that are like, I'm not a protester, I'm not an activist, but it got people out of their homes and into the streets, and And that sort of mentality has carried over for the last year and a half since this administration began. And so I think people already feel like more comfortable. You know, we've had, gun control rallies. We've had, Black Lives Matter rallies. It seems like on a regular basis now there's reasons for people to be taking it to the streets, if you will. And so because that's becoming part of the normal life, if you will, of our communities, asking people to show up at a demonstration. If you'd done that 2 or 3 years ago, they'd have been like, I'm not a radical, like that's not my style. But now they're becoming much more comfortable. So I'd say that's one reason why the numbers are growing. Also, we have had rallies in the morning at like 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, and those are noticeably smaller than the rallies that are at 12, 1, or 1:30 in the afternoon. And so I think timing also has to do with it, that people are more willing to come out in the afternoon, and the weather warming up. I mean, if it's a beautiful sunny day, why not go take a walk twice around the district, and bring visibility to an important cause. And the frequency of them. When we were just having the vigils on a case-by-case basis, they weren't very often. I would say they're once every few weeks, if not less than once a month. But now these Jericho walks are being planned on a more regular basis. People are putting them in their calendars. And, you go to one, you get an experience for it. Okay, this isn't dangerous. This isn't confrontational. I can invite people. And then next time maybe you bring a few people with you. And, the numbers slowly seem to be growing.
And I think people are increasingly fed up with everything that's happening, and the stricter and stricter policies, and as a lot of people tell us, we can't see this as normal. Like this is not normal. Like this is not how our country should be. And I think people are responding to certain leaders saying you have to keep fighting this. You can't just be quiet and allow what this administration is doing to continue in that direction. And again, as a Jew, like never again. Like having gone through the Holocaust, we see certain like little elements of this which remind us of the rise of Hitler and all of that. And so it's important to stand up and say never again. Like this can't happen. Use your voice to stand up for your principles and your rights. And another interesting thing is that if you look at the demographics at these rallies, there are a lot of people from my generation who were there. Some part of it is that they have more of the time to do it. They're not. Some people are retired. But also, it's from my generation. When I grew up, a lot of people were protesting the Vietnam War, and so people took to the streets at that time also. And I think a lot of those same people are kind of reliving that era. I think I myself, did a lot of protesting then, and I feel like there's a like-mindedness among a lot of the people who I see at these rallies. Like we stood up for the values of our country then. It's time. Like we've got to put the hat back on, put the shirt back on. Get back out there and again say our country cannot stand for this. We have to stand up and say something.
Now, I know that the ICE facility is the backdrop of the rallies or the location, but is it the target audience, or is it the other residents and other citizens more who you're trying to reach? What would you say who you're trying to speak to?
I would like the officials inside those ICE offices to take notice of us, to know that we're paying attention, and to be more gracious and compassionate towards people who enter those doors for their immigration hearings. Ideally, I would love for what we're doing outside those walls to influence what's happening inside those walls. In addition, I would like people, in the district and driving by, commuters, employees, people enjoying their meals at those restaurants to take notice as well. And if not, participate with us in, the actual vigil or rally at that time, to take note of it, pay more attention to the issue at hand, and maybe that would motivate people to, get out and vote in the midterms in November who wouldn't otherwise vote. And it's like, okay, maybe I'm not able to walk for whatever reasons, but how can I, bring visibility to this issue, and how can I influence it in other ways? And I think that our presence, our visibility, hopefully has ripple effects, which we're not even aware of. So that's my hope and my prayer, and that's why I show up over and over again.
Yeah, I'm not expecting ICE to change its policies based on us protesting outside the ICE office in Burlington. But I also share Angela's belief that to me the most important thing is to keep everybody around us aware and vigilant about this. And each time that we've walked, a number of people have honked as they've driven by us in solidarity with what we're doing. And I think it gives everybody who's not marching with us a sense of added permission to also stand up and vote our conscience and just to be active in terms of standing up for our principles.
And have you been able to meet or speak with any of the ICE officials, or do you know if anybody has? Have they engaged at all?
No.
I invited them to come on the show. I haven't heard any response yet, but
I know there was one other rabbi who was at one of the rallies that I wasn't at, and he walked up to the door of the ICE office and was told to leave because he was disrupting what was going on there, and he was upsetting people, and he even took a little video of the people outside the door saying, am I upsetting you? They're like, no, like you're supporting us. So the ICE official was not happy by his presence, but the people who were out there were feeling supported by his presence.
But every time we go, there's always a number of officers who will open the door and peek out and kind of watch us. The walls are pretty much all windows with closed vertical blinds. You see a lot of people peeking through the blinds on the top and bottom floor looking at us. And so we know they're there. We know they're watching us in sort of cowardly way, like sneaking out through their blinds. It's like, just come talk to us. I would actually welcome that, having a conversation. But no luck so far.
And I don't see that us even dialoguing with anybody there would make much difference. But
they're not the ones writing the policy. But
Right.
You did say there's kind of the hope that
But
there's a way of going about
there are judges
things.
there, and there are hearings there, and they are making decisions about people's lives. And so, yes, there are policies from the highest levels that are implemented on the local level, but I still think there is autonomy that these ICE officials have, and they can make decisions to a certain extent which are independent. So
and I also
maybe
think
I'm too much of an optimist thinking that we can make a difference, but
I mean, I also think that we're making a statement when we stand outside the ICE office, shouting at them, "We're watching you."
Right.
We're you can't just do whatever you want in there. We're holding you accountable for how you treat people.
And they have, a very nondescript building in a very nondescript office park. I think their intention was to be a sort of anonymous and fly under the radar, and that people wouldn't pay attention to what's going on there. It just looks like another brick building, unmarked except for a flag out front.
Homeland Security flag.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you don't notice that light blue flag, like you'd have no idea, easily drive by. And there are many Burlington residents who don't know that those ICE offices are there, even though they've been there for years.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say that every time I've posted on Facebook that I was at an ICE rally, like people come out of the woodwork saying, "There's an ICE office in Burlington?" Like we had no idea. So if for nothing else, now a lot more people know about the ICE office in Burlington, and they'll pay more attention. I think it's all about us trying to get people to pay attention to what's going on.
Now, I'd say normally you talked about voting. Is there any sort of message for local politicians that you hope that they, when they see these demonstrations, that they kind of will take away from it, or any action you want to see at the state level as far as immigration policy goes? Any message to them?
That's a good question.
I don't know. I don't know what leverage local politicians or state politicians have in this particular area.
Okay. I think one of the things that are, as we're drawing to a close. First of all, what kind of response have you been hearing? You go out there. Have you had people get in touch with you afterwards and voice support, voice opposition? Have you gotten much feedback?
No opposition.
Okay.
I walk, a fine line as a pastor of a church, and I invite my parishioners to join the vigils with me, and several of them have. Others have expressed support. Think it's great that we're getting out there and praying with our feet, if you will. But then I realize, like you said, there are those immigration hardliners who might not share the same views, and I'm their pastor as well, and so I try to be respectful of that. And I have connected with people who have gone to the vigils. I have met people, at other demonstrations and things, and told them about what's going on in Burlington, and they've attended. Another clergy friend of mine who lives in Waltham, he started attending. I think that so much political action is focused in Boston, and all these rallies are on the Boston Common, that it's a unique opportunity for people who live out in the suburbs to attend. And it's like, if you live in Burlington or even the surrounding community, it's a relatively low barrier to participation. You don't have to worry about the city, you don't have to worry about expensive parking, traffic, and so that's why I'm really trying to get the word out in Burlington and Bedford and Lexington and these surrounding communities to say, like, you might not be apt to going into Boston and with all the logistical headaches that accompany that, but like, you can come to Burlington, and they're not even long. They're like an hour and a half max. You can leave whenever you want. And so I try to kind of encourage people to attend by explaining how easy it is and dare I say, enjoyable. So.
So we have a social justice committee at our synagogue, and we've been trying to develop like a hotline kind of thing, so that if we suddenly hear about a rally, we can send out like text messages to large groups of people, and I think people we have some people from your church who are connected to this also, and from the UU Church in Bedford. So we're trying to have a network of people who can, if they hear about a rally, come down to it pretty quickly. So that's a value of our community. I will say that on certain Facebook groups, Burlington Facebook groups, there are a lot of people who express a wide spectrum of opinion about this, and one member of my community posted something about a rally and got a lot of very negative responses on that Facebook group. So I think we need to remember that there is like a huge spectrum here, and people have very strong opinions all along the spectrum, and so that's something that we need to be sensitive to and in dialogue with people about.
Yep, absolutely. And the last thing was, I was at covering the one this week, and I noticed that it was, except for one point where everyone yelled at the building at the end, but for the entire time it was peaceful, obviously, and a lot of times it was actually kind of quiet or almost silent. What's your sense of the commitment to everybody involved to keeping the rallies peaceful, keeping them non-disruptive, and do you think that's the better way to go?
Well, I think we're modeling peace, and we're modeling our values. Like the Jericho walks we're supposed to be walking in silence. That's why they're so quiet.
It's intentional.
It's intentional, right? So we're supposed to be walking in a prayerful mode and a spiritual mode, and just like praying and hoping, and again, like modeling unity with each other and unity for the people who are being affected.
And I would say that I think I can speak for the vast majority of participants when I say that, yes, we want it to be peaceful. Absolutely. We don't want it to be confrontational. We're not there to be agitators or to create hostilities. In fact, the first Jericho walk I attended before we started walking, one of the organizers said, if anybody approaches you and is confrontational towards you, we have people who are trained in conflict management and de-escalation tactics, and we were made aware of who those people were, and the organizer said, if someone comes up to you and is aggressive, you ignore them, you keep walking, and you let one of our trained trained folks know, and they can engage the person. So not only do we not, we are definitely trying to remain peaceful, we're prepared in case folks are, antagonistic or hostile or aggressive towards us, which has actually happened.
Right, and so we're very, very respectful. Like we do not block cars from leaving driveways or side streets, and the police are now there whenever we have a rally, just to keep the peace, and it's more for our protection than not to affect us in any way, but to protect our presence there and our right to demonstrate in a peaceful manner.
Yeah, I actually have a pre-tape conversation that I did with Chief Kent, and we'll see that after this interview. So he talks just about that, how through communication with the police and with even with ICE on his part, he's just able to kind of make sure that everybody has a safe time.
And we want to thank the police for being there for us, and even at this last rally, we were very respectful and stopped whenever there was like a side street and cars were passing through. But by the end, the police were stopping those cars from coming out into the main drive so that we could pass. So they were actually helping us in a positive way. But it was just very, very peaceful, and they have kind of intercepted anyone who might be wanting to disrupt us. So we're very grateful for them for helping us in this.
Well, very good. All right. Well, we are a little bit past time, but that is all right. I want to thank you both for coming in. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and knowledge on this subject.
Well, thank you for doing this program. I think it's important, and it highlights the issue even more, which is, again, so important for everybody to keep in the forefront of their minds right now.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you for having us and for getting a diversity of opinion and perspectives, and for bringing media attention to the vigils. We appreciate it.
So. Great. Thank you.
So there you have it, the views of two of the local organizers of the demonstrations. As noted in the interview, we reached out to ICE for an interview or comment. As of the time of this taping, however, we have had no response. Up next, I interview Police Chief Michael Kent on the laws around public demonstrations, including, as in this case, when they are done on private property, and how demonstrators can work to keep themselves and the public safe during these events. Let's take a look.
I'm now joined with Burlington Police Chief Michael Kent to talk about the safety side, the legal side about these demonstrations, and just sort of in general the exercise of the First Amendment and how it sort of works with public safety, and what people should keep in mind to make sure that these demonstrations and any demonstration is also a safe way of expressing themselves. Welcome, Chief. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, as we've talked about, there's been a police presence at these demonstrations, but it's been very I think sort of a monitoring of the situation. Talk about what the goal is to have, or the reason to have police there, just sort of keeping an eye on things.
Well, that's kind of the goal, just to keep an eye on the things, to have a presence. I think the protesters, who interestingly enough refer to it as a rally, so they're not calling it a protest, at least the ones I've talked to, I think they like having a cruiser there. I think the officials from ICE like having a cruiser there, and I think the property management likes having a cruiser there. So it's a precaution. If we had a serious call come up, or they'd certainly be able to break away. Right. But it's a peace of mind type of thing at this point.
Now, I think one of the questions that some people have, and maybe it kind of came up with the first rally, as they're called, is just it's a government building, but it's on private property. So, what are the sort of the rules around demonstrating, on private property, but with a government building?
Well, it depends on what the group is looking to accomplish. In this case, so far, it has just been to have a presence, get their word out, get their mission out to the public. It's kind of a tough area down there because not a lot of traffic goes in and out of there other than the people doing business. But they have not had any interest in stopping traffic going in or out, disrupting the normal day-to-day business of the ICE facility. What we look for with any group, and we don't deal with it a lot in Burlington, obviously, but is communication. I usually get a heads up, either, frankly, from ICE if they know that there's going to be a protest, or from the group that's going to come down for the rally. They'll give me a call, which I requested from each, just so we're not caught blindsided. And at this point, again, it's just a rally to get the word out to the public as to their political views as to what's going on.
Right.
If they wanted more, then the way it would normally work is the organizers of the rally would say, look, we're going to block the street at X amount of time. We would look at it from a public safety. We might say you can't block the street, or we might say yes, you can, but you're only going to be able to do it for this amount of time. And then you segue into, well, do you want to make a statement? Does someone want to get arrested? How do you want to do that? It's all about communication.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's almost a professional banter back and forth as to what the group wants to accomplish.
So the communication actually rises to the level of, somebody could be arrested.
Yeah, it hasn't. With
No, I
this
know it
group
hasn't
yet,
with
but
this.
it certainly could if it was trending in that direction. We'd come out, or perhaps they'd tell us, look, we want to get arrested. We want to raise the
Right.
temperature, so to speak, and really make a statement.
Now,
And
is
it's
that
better? It's better if we know that ahead of time, so we can prepare.
Right, so is that a way of they obviously it's not like a show arrest, it's going to
Right.
be an arrest, but is that a way of sort of letting both sides know that, okay, arrest will be made, but we're going to keep it peaceful, no one's going to get hurt.
Exactly. What again, if that's their goal to accomplish that, we'll work with them. Obviously, we have to have cause to arrest them. They'd have to
Right.
block the road, after we gave you required to give a dismissal order, X number of times, and then if that's not heeded to, then you can affect a custody.
Right.
But hopefully we won't get to that level.
Yes, and to be clear, this group
Yeah,
has
no,
not done
they've-
anything in that direction.
They always give
simply
me a
been-
phone call when they're going down there, and when they're done. And as I say, we've been able to put an officer down there just to have a presence. So it's worked out fine, and I don't think the ICE officials have had any issues whatsoever with it, as far as I know.
Now, as far as, it is a big group of people. They are sort of, could be focused on what they're doing. And, like the one this week was a march around the district a couple of times. What do you want demonstrators, ralliers to kind of keep in mind just for their own safety as they're kind of doing these things?
Well, obviously, vehicle traffic, you don't want to be, competing with cars in a roadway, try and stay on the sidewalk. Keep cognizant that there's other people using that sidewalk, and just as they have a right to peacefully protest, the other people have a right to walk on that sidewalk. Things of that nature. And we haven't had any issues.
And also just, you kind of touched on it, but, things that if people are going to be making their voices heard, but also, the importance of allowing people to sort of get about on their day-to-day business. Because it is, there are office workers there.
Absolutely.
So that is one of the, I guess, recommendations is kind of be respectful as you're being.
Yeah, if both sides can exactly work together, and the side that's at the rally, at the protest, they need to be prepared. There may be people driving by, yelling things out the window at them, which is their right, that don't necessarily agree. So,
Right.
it's just patience on both sides.
And you bring up an interesting point, because there are people, obviously, that don't agree with their statement. What kind of communication would you like to see, or what kind of approach would you like to see if there's a counter demonstration that comes up, or people want to sort of also make the other side of their
Sure.
of the side heard?
Well, the big thing for us from a public safety perspective is just to be brought into the conversation early on if there was going to be a pro group, if you will, down there. Reach out to the police, let us know. So, in that case, maybe we dedicate more than one car. We'd probably get together with both groups to see if we could have them at, different ends of the street, sidewalk, things of that nature. Again,
Right.
it all comes down to communication. You don't want to get caught not expecting something. You know, it's always easier to plan for the expected.
Right. And have you heard from the public or residents driving by? People called in
Yeah.
just to sort of
Nope.
see what's going on or
No,
report
I
that
haven't
something's
heard
going on?
any, nothing percolating up, at least to my office.
Yeah. And the owners of the park, have they been working, communicating and being in that loop as well?
Yeah. I think going forward, we're going to get a meeting together with management, ICE officials, and people with the rally just to go, you know, if this grows in size over the summer, just so we're prepared exactly what is going to be allowed, what isn't going to be allowed, you know, where are the areas where you can peacefully protest, where are the areas, you know, if the crowd was to get big that would infringe on business down there.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the things that aren't allowed?
Well, certainly violence of any type of that nature.
Clearly.
You know, if they're going to picket, it's kind of similar to a strike across a driveway. You know, you got to keep moving. You got to at certain intervals, let cars in and out, things of that nature. You know, the common sense type of stuff. Again, if you're going to be laying down, you know, protesting any type of thing and blocking an entrance and an exit, then you're, okay, what are you trying to accomplish here? You know, let us know and we'll attempt to accommodate, but you can't, you know, lay in front of an office door for the next 4 hours. You know, that's not going to be allowed.
Right. That's something that could lead to one of those arrests that you mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I guess just, you know, last thing is just, in general, just the Burlington Police Department's philosophy on trying to work with, we're trying to make that balance between public safety and, you know, the First Amendment and people's right to for free expression and demonstration. What's the philosophy of the department?
Well, this country was built on peaceful protest, and our job is to maintain the safety for all involved, whether you have the one side, two sides down there. Our philosophy is just to keep the area safe for everyone involved, to exercise their rights.
Right. And with proper communication through you, just
Absolutely.
let everybody know.
It's like anything, it comes down to communication. We want to be in. If there's going to be, you know, call us, and they've been very good about it on both sides. So it's worked out very well so far.
So far, there's been no issues that I've heard of. So.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Well, those are the questions. Anything that I haven't touched upon that you think is pertinent to this conversation?
No, as I said, we haven't had any issues. Both sides have been very businesslike, if you will, professional, and there's been minimal disruption down there. So, so far, everything from our standpoint has worked well, and we will continue to have a presence there and to assist. To allow people on either side to exercise their right for peaceful protest.
All right, very good.
All right, good.
I appreciate you coming in and taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure.
Well, that's it for this edition of BNews In Depth. I'd like to thank my guests, Rabbi Susan Abramson of Temple Shalom Emeth, Reverend Angela Wells of the UCC Burlington, and Burlington Police Chief Michael Kent. I also thank all of you for watching. I'm BNews Director Rich Hosford, and we'll see you next time.